You're listening to the Deep Purple Podcast, a fan podcast about one of the most legendary bands of all time, Deep Purple. We take a look at the music, history, and people behind the band Deep Purple and beyond. All right, in this bonus episode of the Deep Purple Podcast, we had the privilege to be able to sit and talk with Ray Fenwick, and that's in the wake of our discussion and our episode on the Gillan Band's 1977 album Clear Air Turbulence. So in this episode, we, of course, will be talking about the Clear Air Turbulence album with Ray and his experiences working with the Gillan Band, as well as Ray's beginnings, working with the Spencer Davis Group, Jon Lord's Windows, A Butterfly Ball, Wizards Convention, The Wind in the Willows, Ray's solo work, and as a very special bonus in this bonus episode, Ray is going to reveal his favorite Deep Purple track. What could it be? Well, you'll have to listen and check it out. So here we go. Here's our interview with Ray Fenwick. All right. We are joined by Ray Fenwick this glorious morning. Good morning, Ray. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Afternoon for you. I'm sorry. We keep forgetting.
Yes, it's 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock here.
All right. So, well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. In a recent episode, we covered the Clear Air Turbulence album, and I reached out to you, and you were gracious enough to get back to us, and we wanted to just have a little chat about you and your career, and of course that album. Sure. Could you tell us a little bit about how you started playing and what your early influences were?
Yeah, I started playing. My mother bought me an acoustic guitar with nylon strings when I was around the age of 10. And she showed more interest in it than I did at the time. But then she learned a few chords, and I thought, no, I've got to do this. So I learned a few chords, and I quickly got into it. I had some guitar lessons, and I started playing very young. I was playing in a band at 14, and I joined a ska band when I was just at the end of my 15th year, going into 16, Rupert and the Red Devils. That's how I started.
And I was surprised, ska had this big resurgence in the 90s, but it was interesting to see that you were involved in ska in the 60s. Yeah,
it was. I didn't really know much about it, but my dad found this advert in a local paper, and it was guitarist wanted for ska band, and didn't really know what it was. I went along, and I must have played it right, because they said you got the job, and it was great actually. It was a wonderful gig, and I was very young, and we used to have to play places where I should have been 18, and Rupert always used to say to me, just say you're 18. If anyone asks how old you are, you're 18. I said, well, I don't look 18. He said, it doesn't matter. The clubs are dark. And anyway, so my dad used to take me to these gigs, and we didn't finish till 3 in the morning. We used to play a place called the Roaring Twenties in Carnaby Street. He used to sit outside in the car and wait, bless him. He was a good man like that. He used to ferry me about everywhere. Wow. It seems a lot of people from those days had that same story of playing these underage sort of things. Yeah, they did. I used to go and see I'm from Romford in Essex. It's a place near London, and there's a very famous venue there called the Wickham Hall, which was right next door to a church. And a lot of the guys who started out playing with people like Screaming Lord Such, Ritchie Blackmore, Jimmy Page with Neil Christian, they used to play there, and I used to go and see them play there. And I remember it well. There were these young. Jimmy Page was so young. It was a great place because it only had a capacity of around 180, I think they're only allowed in. It was run by these two gangster type guys, and they were actually film extras. And they used to open the back doors, and they'd take money if the people go, and then all they would do was just push people out. And so they'd have to listen to it outside the venue with the doors open. Then they'd get more in the front. It's a great place. Wonderful.
That's great. So I was looking through your earliest credits, and unless I'm mistaken, the earliest I could find from a songwriting credit for you is a song called On the Horizon.
No, On the Horizon it's the B-side, Crawdaddy Simone. On the Horizon was a Benny King song.
Oh, okay.
It was, after I'd left Rupert and the Red Devils. It was a bit after we'd come back. I joined a band called the Syndicats. That again was an advert my mum found for me in one of the local papers, and it was in Tottenham. And I went there, and Steve Howe was the guitarist,
Okay. Wow.
who later became, the guitarist of Yes.
Yes.
And he was leaving to join a band called Tomorrow. They had quite a big hit with a thing called My White Bicycle. I don't know whether you remember that tune from the 60s. It's a real in type of tune, psychedelia period. And I took Steve's place, and it's rather a strange coincidence that I took Steve's place, and when I left the Syndicats, Peter Banks joined, who was the guitarist of Yes that Steve Howe replaced. And much later on, in 2004, I've been friends with Steve over the years, and I played in Steve's band in 2004, a band called Remedy. We did a tour of Europe, and it was a very good band, and we did a very good DVD as well. So that's, sorry, I'll go back to my first writing credits were, you're quite right, with a guy called Jeffrey Williams, who was the keyboard player in the Syndicats. It was the B-side of On the Horizon, and it's become what's called a freak beat classic. Everybody likes the guitar solo I played in it. And it was because it was a Joe Meek recording, it had that kudos. I'm sure you know about Joe Meek's work. He did Telstar. He did all kinds of 60s stuff. Very, very famous producer. In the end, he killed himself. And they made a movie about him called Telstar, and they used Cordalis Simone as the music over the titles at the end, which was rather nice for me. So it's great.
Great, yeah. So, what was it like working with Joe Meek? He gets like a lot of credit for being like the first, or one of the first producer as an artist types. Like, what was it like working with him?
Yeah, he was a crazy guy. He had a studio over a handbag shop in North London, and it was crazy. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but they recreated it superbly. And it was a place where he wasn't a very good musician. He just really knew. He'd sing you something, and you'd play it. He'd have great ideas, great recording ideas. One of the first guys to use effects like tape echoes, and he would also be into multi-track recording, bouncing between machines. That way, he could get a lot of different generations. This was all pre multi-track. So you've got to understand that it was quite difficult to do all that and do it successfully. But he did, and he had so many hits. He had. I mean, the movie's great. There's a guy called James Corden plays Clem Catini. Clem Catini's a really good friend of mine. He's the drummer from he was the drummer with the Tornadoes, and we've done a lot of work together over the years. But Clem has wonderful stories about Joe. He was a crazy man. He looked nothing like you would expect a musician or a record producer to look. He was very, very strange guy. But I remember when we were doing the B-side, he came in with a beer bottle when we were recording, and he said, "I want you to overdub a guitar solo, Ray." So I said, "Okay, I can do that." And he said, "I want you to play the first bit." He said, "But then I want you to use this." And he gave me a beer bottle, which I used to run up and down the strings, which is on the record.
Just like a makeshift slide, or?
Well, I didn't have a slide at the time, so I used a beer bottle. But hey, it worked. People liked it. So that was my experiences of Joe. We went back a couple of other times to do a couple of other tracks that never came out, and I would like to know where they were, but I really don't know. But he's a very, very sad guy too. Very sad.
Yeah, it's terrible. And that Telstar has been on my to-watch list for a while, so I've got to get around to checking it out.
It's a very good film, and the guy who plays him, Con O'Neill, who I've worked with also, a wonderful actor. He portrays him superbly. But the sense of period is wonderful. It's great. I mean, they got, as I told you earlier, they got the studio perfect. They got the outside of the place perfect as well. And it's just the vibe of the whole thing. And it's a very funny film too. The guy who plays Ritchie Blackmore is great. It's really good.
So how did you get involved with the Spencer Davis group?
Right, the Spencer Davis group, I got involved because I used to live in Holland. After I came back to England I'm jumping ahead a bit here. when I played in Germany with Rupert and the Red Devils, we played in Munich. Cut a long story short, I met a Dutch guy there who was in a band called The Defenders, a guy called Jerry Romain, and we became friends. And after we finished our stint at the nightclub in Munich, the band he was in, The Defenders, also finished their stint. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come to Holland? That's where I live." So we said, "Okay, we're to Holland." So we went. We got a train, myself, the bass player and the drummer, and we went to Holland. And we had a wonderful time there. We got very friendly with a guy called Peter Tetero, who was a great singer. He had a band called the Tea Set. And we played in his, it wasn't a nightclub, it was more of a sort of day club. People used to go there to drink, and we used to play there a lot. And we came back to England. I did a lot of other things in between there, between that and joining the Spencer Davis group. I used to play in a band called the Excels, who used to back a lot of Americans who came over. Anyway, back to the story of how I joined the Spencer Davis group. I got a call one day from Peter Tetero, who was the singer of the Tea Set, who by now had become a big star in Holland. And he said, "Remember Jerry Romain you came to Holland with?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he was in the Tea Set with me." But he said he's joined another big band in Holland called The Motions. So he said, "Would you like to join the Tea Set?" So I said, "Oh, I'll give it a shot." So I went to Holland and I joined the Tea Set. I stayed with the Tea Set. The Tea Set, in many different guises, decided they wanted to carry on doing something different. I was more into, kind of the psychedelia period of the time. So I got together with the keyboard player of the Tea Set and the bass player, and we formed a band called After Tea. We became very successful in Holland too, having hits. And I used to lodge in a house that was owned by the father of a girl who worked in a very famous agency in Holland called the Paula Kett Agency. And they used to bring over a lot of British acts, rock acts, Small Faces, Spencer Davis, Jimi Hendrix. And she came to me one day and she said, "Spencer Davis is over, and he told me he's looking for a guitarist." And I said to him, "We have one of those living in our house." So I said, "Oh, thanks very much." And he said he'd like to meet you. So I said, "Oh, great." So he said that they played the previous night. They were in Rotterdam, staying at a hotel in Rotterdam. And I said, "Okay, I'll go and see him." I said, "Well, what does he want me to do?" He said, just take your guitar with you. So I go down there, walk into the foyer, I meet Spencer. And I thought, he said, "Play for me." I said, "Spencer, I've just got," I said, "stick the headstock to my ear." He said, "I can tell whether you can play or not." So I played, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "I really like what you do." So come back to England, and he said, "We're making a new album at the moment, and if it works out, you got the gig." So I came back to it. I left the After Tea band, came back to England, and it all works out, so I got the gig. So complete luck, right place, right time.
So it was kind of towards the end of that first stint, and then there was kind of you reformed in the early 70s?
Yeah, we went through a period where we had Eddie Hardin, myself, Charlie McCracken, who was the bass player from Taste, and Pete York. But then the band kind of drifted apart. I started to do a lot of sessions, and Eddie and Pete formed Hardin York. But then in the 70s, we got involved with Roger Glover, and Roger started to produce, I think it was 2 albums we did with Roger, Glago and Living in the Back Street. And so Roger became our producer. And we started to do a lot of work again. We went to America. We did a couple of tours of America with Focus, various other artists. And it was a good band. Spencer always had great bands. He really did. He's a very John Mayall character, always picked the right musicians. Very good.
It seems like from the songwriting credits, like when the band reformed, it should have been the Eddie Hardin and Ray Fenwick group. You guys were doing...
we used to write everything, Eddie and I. Eddie's dead now, bless him. But we had a long writing partnership throughout right the way through, right up until Eddie died. Really, we were still working together. Not long before Eddie died, we'd been to Germany to play live. But he just started, bless him, he just suddenly died one day in his swimming pool. It was in one of those heat waves in France. And his wife found him floating in the pool there. And that was the end of poor Eddie. So it wasn't a long illness or anything. He just passed away.
Yeah, it's a terrible loss. He had left behind some really great stuff.
Yeah, he did. And we worked a lot on the Wizards Convention stuff. We did the Butterfly Ball together. And we were good. We had our ups and downs over the years, Eddie and I. But we always came back to work together. We were a good working team. We used to write good songs, I think. And, we just used to, we kind of knew each other's playing. So it always worked when we played together.
So how did this, you've got this great album, Keep America Beautiful, Get a Haircut.
Yeah.
How did this album come about?
Well, I was touring with Spencer. I think it must have been 69, 70, something there like that. And we did a lot of tours of America. I must have done about 12 tours with the group in America. We were there all the time. And I remember I saw a poster, a billboard, or I think it was a big poster. Not quite sure where it was. It may have been by the side of the road. And it was one of these Keep America Beautiful things. It was President Johnson's wife, I believe, that was involved in that. You probably know more about it than I do, Lady Bird Johnson. Mm-hmm. And she came up with a great idea of beautifying America by telling people to get their hair cut.
So it's like a real thing.
Yeah, and I saw that, and I thought, no, this can't be real, surely. It just really dawned on me. And we had this wonderful artist in the band, Dave Hines. He was the drummer of the band at the time, and he used to do this great. Mostly stayed in Holiday Inns, and always in a Holiday Inn on the wall was a mural, and it was usually of a Greek ruin. And there would be pillars, collapsed, and mm-hmm. it just lent itself to having things added to it. And Dave used to carry these beautiful art pencils around, and he used to draw on them. He used to put things like ice cream vendors by the side of one of the pillars. He'd have Superman flying in across the sky, but all beautifully done. He'd put army personnel in. Or you put right in the distance, you'd see a tank. And we used to watch in the morning when the girls came in to clean the room. I watched one day. She's looking at this thing and she's thinking, "This one's different." Anyway, Dave, I said I'd seen this thing, Keep America Beautiful, Get a Haircut, and Dave said, "Oh, I'll tell you what." He said, "I'll do you a drawing of you as the person, because of long hair, in Keep America Beautiful." And he did. And I remember I kept it, and it was really nice. So when we did the album, I remembered that drawing, and so I got Dave to do the cover. So Dave did the cover. That's how the album came about. And it was kind of it's a bit of a concept album. It's all about our times in America and various bits and pieces. But someone's interested in putting it out on vinyl again, so I think it's going to get a second life. I'm re-releasing all my stuff again very soon. I've done a deal with a company in this country, and they're going for most of the things that I have, most of my catalog, and that's one of the things we're going to be putting. We're doing a boxed set, 3 CDs of of most of the stuff I've done over the years. Well, not all of it, but snippets of it. So that's going to be very interesting.
Great, can't wait for that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's going to come out. We've got this at the moment, releasing physical stuff at the moment, but it'll go up on streaming fairly quickly, I would think.
Ray, could you talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Jon Lord and your recollections of getting involved with the Windows project?
Yes, I can do. Yeah, John, or the captain, as we called him. I know everybody says these things when someone's passed away, but John really was a gentleman. He was a funny man, incredibly fun, incredibly generous, unbelievably generous. And he was just an all-round nice guy and a great player too. I mean, he was a wonderful. I mean, John was. People don't realize what a very good classical player John was. I mean, I think it was that. If he'd have had any other route to a career, I think he would have been a classical pianist and a classical composer. But I really got involved with John because of Roger Glover. I started to work for Roger because I was a session guitar player. I think you've interviewed Martin Ford, haven't you? And Martin used to look after, my session work. And I think I got a call one day to work with Roger, and it was the remnants of Ian doing Shirka Zoo album. Mm-hmm. And that's how the Gillan Band started, but that's another story. But that's how I met Jon. Introduction from Roger, really, and because I was working with Roger, I became friends with Roger. So I'd go to Roger's house, and Jon would be there, and Jon always said, "Oh, we must do something together, man. Like everybody does, do lunch syndrome." But it happened when he decided to do this Windows project. He asked me to do it, and that's how I did it. And it was with the Munich Opera with the conductor Eberhard Schöner, who was the leader of the whole orchestra. It was quite an experience, actually, because it was not only the orchestra, it was the Munich Opera as well, and it was great fun. It would be with Jon, and we had the great Tony Ashton, who's no longer. All these people are no longer with us. Blimey, I'm still here. It's amazing that but it was very sad when Jon died. There's a wonderful documentary you should watch. I don't know if you can get it in America. It's Rick Wakeman. It's an appreciation of Jon Lord.
Yes, I've seen it. It's fabulous. It really is. Because it's presented by another wonderful keyboard player. It's great. It's tear-jerking stuff when you watch that. It's marvelous. Yeah. I think it's. I can't remember where I saw it, but I think it's on YouTube or something. I've seen.
I think it is on YouTube, but it really is. It gets into the life of Jon and what a wonderful player he was.
So anybody that's heard Windows knows that it's not a straightforward rock project. So how did you feel about being part of a project like this, and how did your hard rock fans respond to you being part of a project that was a little off like this?
Well, I get these ridiculous comments now from my family about the yellow suit that I wore, because it's on YouTube and it's on various things. This ridiculous yellow suit. I don't even remember where I got it from. I look like a bloody canary. It's the most amazing thing. No, but it really was just another job. I used to do all kinds of different sessions. You have to. I always say to people when they say, "Oh, I'd like to be a session guitar player," and the thing I always say to them, I say, "Can you play like Hank Marvin?" And they go, oh, "Who's he?" And I say, "Well, he's the guitarist that was with the Shadows." Oh, I said, well, why do I have to play like him? I said, because you might turn up at 10 in the morning and the producer will say, can you play like Hank Marvin? And you've got to be able to say, yes, I can, even if you can't. Because otherwise you will be out of the door in a taxi and they'll never book you again. And so doing something like that was slightly different, it wasn't phasing really. But I knew all the guys it was David did it, David Coverdale, Glenn Hughes. I think Yvonne Elliman did it as well. No, she didn't. No, she was there she was the girlfriend of Glenn Hughes at the time. And of course the great Tony Ashton. So I was with a lot of my friends really. So that made it all a lot easier. For not just me, but for them too. Because I guess for anyone doing something like that, it's not in your comfort zone, is it? It's something different. But I think it worked really well. I love the Windows. There are some great Jon stylistic pieces in that. There's one of my favourite Deep Purple tracks is This Time Around. I love the Come Taste the Band album. It's a wonderful album.
Well, you're in good company with us. That is actually my all-time favorite Deep Purple song.
It's great, and there's the chord changes in that featuring. It's from Windows. There's a thing in it like very much like that. And when I heard that, when they did that, I thought, I've heard that. It's just an homage to Windows. But Jon was wonderful at melodies. This time around, it's the most gorgeous melody. Mm-hmm. I have a band that I play with locally and where I live, and we do it. We do a medley. We do a mashup of Child in Time and that, and people love it. It's it's got the greatest guitar riff. The opening, Tommy Bolin. It's just, he was a great guy. He was. I used to like Tommy. I used to hang out with him, because we used to stay at the Holiday Inn in London, and he was always there. He was a crazy guy. I used to love Tommy. He'd come down to breakfast looking like an American Indian. It must have taken him hours to get ready with different colour streaks in the hair and feathers coming from it. He was just a one-off. He was great.
So we spent 4 full episodes covering the Butterfly Ball and diving into the different artists that were involved in it, and it's one of our favorite albums from this collection or from anything related to Deep Purple. So do you have any strong memories of the process for putting the album together or the concert?
Yeah, I do. I remember I was always working with Eddie on and off, and he said, I'm working with Roger. And I said, oh, great, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing this this track, Love Is All. He said it's for a project called The Butterfly Ball. And I said, oh, wow. So he played me a couple of bits from it. And one of them was that track, Love Is All. And Eddie sang it to me. And I thought, God, this is a great melody. Very poppy. And that's Roger's input. Roger always was the guy that knew what a good hook was. He really did. He was very good like that. He's the one that I don't know whether you know that he did the Black Knight riff, which is the opening to Summertime by Ricky Nelson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Roger heard Ritchie playing that, and he said, "What's that you're playing?" And he said, "It's a riff from Summertime, James Burton." And Roger said to him, "That's great. We're going to use that." And Ritchie said, "No, we can't." He said, "Yes, we can." And Roger, they wrote that song, Black Knight, around that riff from Summertime. So, and I go back to Eddie, and Eddie played me this track, and I could hear Roger's influences in it, and I just knew that was going to be a hit, that song. And then the next thing I knew, Ronnie Dio was doing it, who was like, wonderful. What a singer Ronnie was, And I heard the demo that they did, and it was just stunning. It's just, Ronnie's one of those guys. It's the end of Love Is All, which is so wonderful, where he sings When Your Back's Against the Wall,
mm-hmm.
and it's like a counter melody he sings, just wonderful. And that's the first time I heard it. And then Roger, Eddie said, "Well, get Ray to play guitar." So Eddie was always like that. He always said, "Get Ray to play guitar." So it was great. He never liked doing anything without me. Eddie always wanted me to play guitar, which was lovely. So I came along, and at the time I was working with Mo Foster and Les Binks from Fancy. We had, as you probably know, we had a couple of big hits in America, and he said, I said, well, should we get those guys? And Eddie said, yeah, get those. He said, all right, let's get Les along. Eddie always used to like people on the sessions that he liked. It was always, that was the paramount thing with Ed, to have people he liked on the sessions. And so that's how we got involved. And Mo Foster was the bass player, and Les Binks was the drummer. And not on the album though, but this was for the live concert. But the album was again all the musicians picked by Roger. Eddie Jobson played violin, didn't he, from Curved Air? Mm-hmm. Did you know that on Love Is All? And I didn't pick any of the other musicians apart from the 2 guys that did the live album. All the other musicians, I was again, if you like, just a session guy on the album. But as we were doing the album, it was just, I knew it was a classic. Songs like Old Blind Mole, great, just wonderful. And what's the very first song that opens it? Good Morning.
Yeah.
Get Ready.
Get Ready.
Get Ready. There you
go. With Barry St. John and Helen Chappell, and it's a beautiful operatic thing, isn't it? Where there's 2 counter melodies going. Great, really, really good, superb. But that was, I agree with you. It's a wonderful album and still stands up now.
Absolutely. So as far as like I mean, you can tell in the live performance that the backing band is basically Fancy, and
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
and just how tight you guys were and how comfortable you were in that setting, laying down a background for these. Obviously the showcases on these rotating cast of vocal performers, but wow, what a band.
Yeah, the band again. It was these guys. Mo Foster, a wonderful bass player. I mean, he's played with Jeff Beck, ABBA, Phil Collins, all kinds of people. Jerry Rafferty. He's a great bass player. But that was kind of at Mo's beginning of his career. Mo started to do the very first session that Mo did. I happened to be on. It was for a big pop star called Barry Ryan in England. And I remember the first time I met Mo, I was sitting next to him in the studio. It's a fairly small studio. And I said, "What you got in your bag there?" And he said, "Oh, I brought sandwiches." Sandwiches in a flask. And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, first of all, you won't need the flask because there's coffee on the go here all day long." And I said, we usually go out at lunchtime to the Indian restaurants. It was great. And we always laugh about that story. And that was the first day I saw that I heard him play, I thought it was wonderful. And Les was a great, he's still a great drummer, but a great funky drummer. We were very tight because, when we as session guys, you have to get everything right. There's no room for error. We used to have to do sessions. You'd turn up at 10, and you'd have to get 3 or 4 songs done by 1 o'clock. So you can't screw around. You've got to be able to do it, And I think that those two guys, they had that kind of ethos. They were great, solid, funky, and also very simple. I thought Fancy was a very sympathetic rhythm section because after all said and done, they were all great songs.
So another notable artist that you collaborated with was David Coverdale. Could you tell us a little bit about your collaborations with him?
Yeah, he was on it was the first Wizards convention, I think. We wrote a song for him, Eddie and I, called Money to Burn, which is a great track, fantastic track, I think. And of course I worked with him when he did Windows. Just great guy, fantastic guy. I always loved his voice. I think he had a kind of it wasn't just a rock voice; it was a pop voice. It was so recognizable. You could always recognize David when he started to sing. He wasn't just another rock singer. Yeah, he had something special, and I think he was a great replacement for Ian. Ian, having played with him on 4 or 5 albums, I know what a wonderful singer he is too. But David just had something different. I think he took Deep Purple to another level. It was all the personal problems that started to go wrong in Deep Purple at that period. It had nothing to do with the music. The music was going in the right direction. There is nothing wrong. I know that they got stick with, but I think it became a great fusion. I don't know about you. Come Taste the Band had that funk element. It also had that hard rock element, but it also had a commerciality too. Very memorable melodies, the songs, great stuff. But that's my memories of David, and still are. I haven't seen him in years, but he's still singing great. So what can you say?
Oh, absolutely. Were there any other collaborations that you did with Coverdale besides Money to Burn?
No, only the live Butterfly Ball. We did no other tracks with him. In fact, I remember Eddie wanted to get him back to do the second Wizards, but he wasn't available. So unfortunately, we would have worked with him again. But I thought he was very good on the ball. He really was. It was just I'm not quite sure why Roger couldn't get the complete cast from the album. I don't know what the reasons were for that. But everybody, you saw the show. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't quite gotten to Wizards Convention yet on the show, and we're really looking forward to it. But we've been listening to that album for years, and you've got some great collaborations on that. As far as that album went, was it kind of a collaboration between you and Eddie and others, and then kind of
it was Eddie's idea. It was it was Eddie's idea, but it's like, bless him, as like, I'm not doing it without you, Ray. So it was one of those. He was so nice like that. It was just always, he always, oh no, we got to do it together. But it wasn't my idea. It was his idea.
So when you've got like a song on that, there again, like the Butterfly Ball, this rotating cast of singers comes through. Was it a collaboration with the singers, or was it just like, oh, this sounds like this would be a good one for Glenn Hughes?
And it was also getting people to do it as well, because people. It was at a time when people were very busy and we couldn't always get them. So first choices weren't always there. So we'd find out who was available. But of course, we'd always pick people that suited the song.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some great stuff on those albums. There really is some fabulous stuff. Just really, you can hear the fun performances, because we used to, it's at the time when you could have a lot of studio time. Nobody really bothered. And at one point, Eddie had his own studio, so we could spend as much time as we liked doing stuff. So were there three Wizards conventions? I think there were three. Were there?
I think there were three. Yeah, I think I have the first two. I don't know if I have the third one.
Yeah, the third one's, we've got Chris Farlow on and various people. They're all good. They all have a theme. We always wanted just an album full of good songs. That was it. We didn't really want fillers, whatever we'd write. We used to write a lot of stuff we just never saw the light of day, and then we'd say, oh, let's take a bit from that song we wrote whenever, and we'd join two pieces together and we'd get a song, So most songwriters write.
Yeah, I mean, it was really striking to me hearing that album when I did, as I think I was in my mid-teens that I picked that album up, and growing up listening to the radio, hearing the same old classic rock songs in rotation, and I get this great album and say, why aren't any of these songs being played on such great songwriting on those albums?
Yeah, I know. It's always that thing of the classic promotion, isn't it? The other thing was that we weren't a live band, and at that period, touring was very important. We did kind of work together, some of those people, because Eddie Hardin wrote a musical adaptation of Wind in the Willows. I don't know whether you've heard that. And we did a big live concert in Germany, and we also did the studio album of it. So that's kind of only the time that we ever played live with some of those people.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just telling John before you got on, I was watching it last night. And because I had kind of heard whispers of it, but it wasn't something that was really around. And back when we were really getting into this stuff, you were kind of at the mercy of what the local record store had. And it was slim pickings unless you had if something had been recently released or there was an import. So
it's like everything, isn't it? When you look back, a lot of one's favorite music never saw the light of day. I mean, I can remember, I used to love Dixie Dregs. The guitarist I worked with a lot turned me on to them, and it was like nobody'd ever heard of them. And Steve Morse, he's the guitarist of Deep Purple now, but I was just so into Dixie Dregs. But I think it's one of those things that people like to be into something that nobody else is into. And I think maybe the Wizards Convention was one of those things.
True. So most Purple fans know your work from the Ian Gillan Band. So could you tell us a little bit about how that band formed?
Yes, I can. It came from working with Roger Glover. Ian was doing his solo. He was doing some few solo projects, and I again was booked as a session guitar player. I'd never met Ian before. I'd met Roger before, but it just really happened that way. And I was booked on the session. He got John Gustafsson in, who was the bass player with the Big Three, who were a Liverpool band that had reasonable success in the 1960s. Jon also played in Roxy Music. He was with a band called Quatermass. And great singer, great bass player. And Ian really liked him as a person as well. So he was booked in on the session. And they had two guys from Elf, Mickey Lee Saul, because Roger produced one of the Elf albums, I believe, and Mark Nossif, who was the drummer. And we started to do all this material with Ian. We did a couple of covers. We did Trying to Get to You, Roy Orbison song that Elvis covered. Various bits and pieces like that. Ian was really into rock and roll. We did we started writing a few rock and roll pieces. And Ian started to really like the sound that we were making. And he came in one day and he said, "Do you guys want to form a band?" So he said, "Yeah, why not?" And it was really like that in those days. And I said, "We said, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, he said, I fancy going out on the road again." So he said, "All right, we'll get it all sorted out." He said, "I'll get my people involved and we get some contracts drawn up and this, that, and the other." And so that's how it started. And then we started to do what was the first album, Child in Time. And Mickey Lee Saul had to go back to America, I believe, and we didn't have a keyboard player. So it was suggested that we got Mike Moran. We all knew Mike. Mike was a top session guy, a really talented musician. And he just had a hit, I think, was it around that time? He was in the Eurovision Song Contest with Lindsay DePaul. And he'll never live that down, but he was. But it's a very successful tune, actually, so it probably made him a few bob. But yeah, he became the pianist and keyboard player. And that's how we got together. It was really on Ian deciding that he wanted to play again. And he wanted to play with us guys because he liked the sound we made. It was as easy as that.
So the title track for the debut album, Child in Time, whose idea was it to do a reworked version of the original, which we think is fantastic, by the way?
Ian's idea. He always liked that song, and I believe John Gustafson really liked it too. And it was, just one of those things that we just started to play. And I remember saying, if we're going to do this, look, we need to do it in a slightly different way. So I suggested a couple of chord changes that are not quite the same as they are on the original, and that's how that came about. But it's pretty melody-wise and arrangement-wise. It's very much like the original. But we took a few things out and added a few things, but we just made it our own. It's a different version. No point in doing it the same.
Is that the version that you play these days?
It is, yeah. We do, yeah. I do that with my band. We do the first half of the song. We do it. We do a bit of a mishmash. The intro we open up exactly like the Deep Purple record. We then go into the Gillan version, which has got the other chord changes for the guitar solos, and then we come out of the guitar solos. I've got a really young guitar player in my band. He's in his 20s and he's wonderful. I used to teach him at a local school. He's a great guitar player. And now he plays with me, but I love him in the band. He's a fabulous player. And anyway, we do, and then we go into, after the guitar solos, we go into that drum break that leads into the riff of This Time Around, and then we do two verses of This Time Around, and we just go back to a little bit of Child in Time at the very end of the song. People love it, but not a lot of people know This Time Around. They obviously all know Child in Time. So many people come up and say, "What's that second song you played?" That's Deep Purple. Is it? Yeah, it is. Check it out.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
You have to keep if you have any videos of that performance.
Yeah, if ever we get it up, I'll get it over to you. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Excellent. So, I had read somewhere that Gillan was very open to letting Ian Gillan Band to letting you guys kind of do your thing musically. Like he will not you had a lot of creative freedom. Would you say that was correct?
That's absolutely true. Whether or not that was a good thing, I don't know. I mean, I obviously think it was, because I really liked the music that we made. It was something different, but of course, the fans didn't like it. It was just, I remember reading what is Ian doing getting involved in jazz rock? those kind of comments. But it's the same kind of thing that poor old Tommy Bolin used to have to sustain when he started playing with Deep Purple, and people used to shout for Ritchie all the time. It's to be expected, you know. It's the thing with that band too. It also, I think we all felt differently about the way that it didn't affect us, that people perhaps criticised it in that way, because we were strong enough people, having come from a session playing background, to withstand those kind of criticisms, because we just knew that what we were doing was good. I mean, I can't think of another way of describing it. And Ian did give us a lot of freedom. He really did. But with hindsight, maybe had he wanted to rein us back a little, we could have perhaps made it somewhat of a fusion between Deep Purple and the Ian Gillan Band, rather than the Ian Gillan Band as a separate entity. But he did give us a lot of freedom. You know, good on him. I think he kind of enjoyed it too, because he was doing something that was so unlike whatever he'd done before. Ian always, his record collection, I remember going to his house and he'd say, my record collection stops here. And it would be like Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley. You know, that's what he was brought up on. And Deep Purple, really, I guess that. So when the Ian Gillan Band came along, this was like a new venture for him, breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you guys did do something different, because, I mean, forming a Deep Purple clone, while I'm sure it would have put out some good music, wouldn't have been quite as interesting. It was already covered.
No, it wouldn't, of course. No, and then when he obviously had a lot more success with Gillan, it was really back into the Deep Purple-esque area, wasn't it? Because he had John McCoy. Who was a guitar player? I don't remember the guitar player. Do you remember the Gillan? I can't remember. Bernie
Tormé.
Bernie Tormé.
Yeah, that's it, Bernie Tormé. So it was. I know Bernie; he's a lovely guy. It just really sort of went back a step rather than forward a step. But of course, it became very, very popular. You know, he did Trouble, Elvis, and you know, that was a great. He did a great job on it. But it was, again, it was safe, wasn't it? And safe for him, again, was a lot of success with it. More success than we had with the Ian Gillan Band.
Yep, I've long argued that I prefer Ian Gillan Band over Gillan, as much as I like Gillan, just because it was taking some chances and doing something so interesting.
Well, it was a bit of a covers band in a way. It was, you know, they did the Stevie Wonder song and Elvis, and you know, it was kind of Ian sings the hits, you know what I mean? But it was, you know, I can't knock it. And Colin, of course, Colin Townsend went with that. And I don't think it was that much of a pleasant experience for Colin, because Colin's become a very, very successful musician. He's a great film writer now. He works for Disney. Not there's much films going on at the moment, but he's got a jazz label, and he's got a wonderful orchestra called the Mask Orchestra. Colin's a really kind of laid back, gentle guy, and I can't imagine how he got on in the Gillan Band. because when he was with us, he was able to bring in the jazz and just he was a great flute player. He is a great flute player too, as you probably heard with the Gillan Band. On Clear Air Turbulence, you know, all that front end stuff. Wonderful. That's Colin.
We recently reviewed the Clear Air Turbulence album, which is a clear favorite, especially of Nate. We've read a lot that Gillan wasn't happy with the mix for that album. Do you remember anything about that? And if
Yeah, I do. He it was done at his studio, and he decided that we were going to mix it somewhere else. He just I don't really know what he didn't like about it, to be quite honest, but he decided that's what he wanted to do, so we all went down to Rockfield. and then we mixed it down there, and he didn't like those either. I remember he had the 2 tapes in his hand, the 2 masters, and at the end of the session, he said, "You got a Revox, haven't you, Ray?" Which is a reel-to-reel tape recorder. He said, "You want these?" So I said, "Yeah, I'll have them here." So he gave me, which I've still got. He gave me the Rockfield mixes.
Wow.
Which later came out on Angel Air. But we went back and he decided. I mean, Roger was really involved in all of that, much more than we were. I mean, we used to put our two penneth in about the mixing, but in the end, he was happy with it. So it came out on Island Records, and Ian was happy. But in answer to your question, I don't really know what it was that he was looking for. It's a bit like that story. I don't know if you've ever seen that wonderful thing. It's a great film of Burt Bacharach recording Alfie with Cilla Black, and George Martin was the producer. And it went on take after take after take. This is in a studio with poor Cilla singing it with a full orchestra. And George, you see on the film, George says to him, "What exactly is it you're looking for, Bert?" And he said, "Well, it's just that extra something, George." And George turns to him and says, "I think we had that in take 3." So that's it, isn't it? And I always relate that. It's like Ian. What is it you don't like about it? Well, I'm not really sure, but anyway, they must have got it right in the end. We just let them get on with it, and it came out. So there you are. That's the story.
So a few years ago, I stumbled upon this single you did, "Queen of the Night." And I heard the song, and then I said, "Wow, this is great," hoping that it was part of an album. And then, of course, it was just the single. Was it meant to be part of a larger project, or was it just a one-off? How did that come about?
It was going to be, I think it was going to be something to do with Fancy. We were going to use it for Fancy. It was written by myself and Mike Hurst, but it's coming out again. So that's going to be available for downloads pretty soon. Once all this the virus thing gets sorted out. But having said that, it's great. The downloading scene is so good at the moment because everybody's stuck at home. So it's a good time for us that have got back catalogue. So we're going to put that out. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a really good track. It's I think I've got a feeling that was John Gustafsson playing bass on that.
Oh wow.
I think so. Yeah, it was just a really, really good song. Again, another good partnership of mine is Mike Hurst. I mean, Mike, he produced Cat Stevens, he did all the Shawaddy Waddy singles, he did First Cut is the Deepest, and he's just a very fine producer. He did those great Cat Stevens records, I Love My Dog, Matthew and Son, Gonna Get Me a Gun. And Mike and I have worked together. We worked on all the fancy stuff. And, we still work together now. So, and that was a Mike Hurst production.
So you told us that in the recent years, you're part of a local band that plays. Besides that, what other musical projects have you been up to recently?
Oh, right. I've been working with Gary Cobain. I don't know if you know who Gary Cobain is. Gary Cobain is, he calls himself the psychedelic wizard. He had a very successful, and he still does have it, it's called The Future Sound of London. They sold a lot of records and download stuff. He worked with a guy called Brian Douglas, and it was all electronic music. Just a very, very, very clever guy. Anyway, one of the guys who I got introduced to was Gary Cobain, and he said, I'm making an album at the moment. Would you like to perhaps come and try out on a couple of things? And I said, yeah, why not? So I did. Anyway, I went, and it really worked out. And cut a long story short, we became real good friends. And we are now putting out very soon a 42-minute, what they call album single. I think you've heard about these. So it runs for 42 minutes. And it's a wonderful piece called We Persuade Ourselves We Are Immortal. And I helped write that tune. But it's stunning stuff. You'll love it. It's full string orchestra, choirs. I did a lot of the guitar parts, and then they came in and rewrote them with strings. So the arrangement is all the guitar parts that I was playing doubled up with string orchestra. It's fabulous. I think it's going to be very successful. And we're doing I've done most of the album with them. The album's not due yet, but pretty soon the single, a 12-minute single with a video, and then there's the 42-minute version of the same song. We Persuade Ourselves We Are Immortal. So I've been doing that with Gary, the Psychedelic Wizard. I've also got a single coming out with a guy called David Harks at the end of this month on the 29th. It's a rework of the Little Dragon song Twice, which was a hit in the 80s, I believe, or maybe the 90s. Great singer, great record. It's on a label called Boogie Angst in Holland. It's one of those, I'm getting involved with all the dance guys now, you see. and on the press release for this, it's great. They do all this thing about David Harks, and there's 3 remixes on it. It's all the stuff that they do for young people now. And it says I play a guitar solo at the end, quite a long guitar solo, and they said this is played by the 73-year-old blues maestro Ray Fenwick. So, but I just wish they hadn't put my age. Blues maestro would have done.
Maestro is good. Yeah.
Maestro is good. Didn't even need the blues, but they're all kind of, like, oh, it's great, man. There's this old guy playing guitar on this track. But it's a great record. It's really good. It's a 4-minute, single, and it's a lovely atmospheric thing. The guy sings it great, and I just love him being part of it. It's just, I'm working with Gary Cobain is just so good. He's just bloody genius. It's all, when he sends me all these mixes he's done, bits and pieces. It's just so good. But as soon as it's out, I'll let you know, and you can take a listen to it and make your own mind up. But I think you'll love it. There's lots of guitar playing.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Where can people go to keep track of stuff you're coming out with? Or
yeah, I mean, if you, I normally try to get stuff. It'll be if you're on Facebook, Gary's page. So just watch out for it. And it's going to be under the name of Amorphous Androgynous. That's Gary's side project to the Future Sound of London. So I'm very excited about it. It's when someone said we're doing a 42-minute single, I thought, did I hear that right? I said, well, 42 minutes. Yeah, 42 minutes.
So you're not really shooting for radio play then?
No. They'll just take part. But it's one of those great things where Gary's things get used on various other things. Bits of it will get used in film and all kinds of stuff, but the radio one is 12 minutes long. So, but there are stations that do all this now, aren't there? It's like I tell you, I mean, how old are you guys? May I ask?
We're in our early 40s.
Yeah.
Early 40s, okay.
Not as early as we'd like, but early enough.
No, early-ish, yeah. But it's all changed, hasn't it? And I'm just so glad to be involved in something new. It's something Gary hadn't thought of doing, was bringing guitars into and of course when he heard it, he just thought, oh, this is great, man. What is this? Yeah, they're called guitars, And it just all worked for him, and he was so pleased with it all. And it's worked out great. So, I'm looking forward to it. So that's me up to date, really. And I've got my band, which I play with, but unfortunately, we're not playing at the moment, and God knows when we're ever going to play. I don't know.
All right, Ray, thank you so much for joining us today on the Deep Purple podcast. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's been wonderful. And next time we do something, I hope it's in happier and safer times. Thank you, and goodbye to everybody. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, so that was our interview with Ray Fenwick. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. And it was a really special one for me in particular, just because, well, Ray's been part of some of my favorite albums. If you've been paying attention and listening to the show and checking our scores, if you look at my highest rated albums, if you look at Air Turbulence and the Butterfly Ball, and we haven't done it yet, but the Wizards Convention. Ray is a part of all of that, and his music has really colored my musical development in life for probably the better part of 30 years now. So really great to talk to him. He was such a nice guy and so generous with his time. Really thankful we got a chance to sit with him. Hope you enjoyed it. Check us next week. We'll be back with a regular episode. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the Deep Purple Podcast. If you like what you hear and would like more episodes in the future, please donate on Patreon to support the show. You can also give us a rating on iTunes to help new people discover the show. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for show updates. See deeppurplepodcast.com for more details. Thank you for listening.
And her main concern is that she can't get her roots done
Yes.
because the hairdressers are not open.
Yes.